guys have any questions in general, and just drop it in the chat. Obviously, we'll talk more about it. But in general, I would say my number one advice that I got just throughout the, I guess 2 years now of interviews, right, is, well, I guess two. One is to always just be yourself, and I know it's harder, easier said than done. But just in general, I was always worried about being like, come off too bubbly or like too not serious, or people not taking me seriously for the surgery interviews, because as people think, which is like true, surgery world is pretty serious and there's a lot of like uptight people, so to say, but there's always a number of people that are, going to be just like me, or just, multiple different personalities. So, and if you want to fit into a program where you think you will feel your best and you'll do the best, is you just have to be open about who you are as a person. And yeah, it might take, a year or two to get in or so, but I think it's worth it waiting for the right program, because it is 5 years of your time and education. Even though we do work, like 6 out of the 7 days pretty much, like we're all 7 days out of the 7 days, but it still matters meeting the right people, having somebody to like, even, after work, like get breakfast and like spend time with. But so I think being yourself during the interviews is very important, because if somebody doesn't value you for who you are, doesn't think that you would be a good fit, then it's right for them to feel that way. Then it's good, and then you'll just move on to another program. But I think that was the biggest advice. And then the second is always know your application, like in and out. I have gotten asked so many random questions for my application, even like in the rooms where they're like residents. I remember I wrote something in my hobbies about like I love playing are they not video games, what are they called, like the board games. I love playing board games. They're just like random games, right? And like I just put like all like board games, and then somebody randomly asked me like, what's your favorite board game? And honestly, like it took me off guard, because one, I didn't expect anybody to ask me that, and two, I was just like, I don't know. I feel like I don't remember like half the names of the games that I play. I just like do, if I ever have. But it's just like one of those like fun things that I would like love to do with my friends, or like when we had time. But just things like that, like no matter what you're right, even if you say like, oh, I love hiking, right? Be like prepared to answer where's the favorite hike that you ever done? It's just like random little things, but you have to be ready for like everything, every little thing, every little word that you put on your application. You have to be ready to answer it.
That's actually so true. I completely agree. I was asked about so many of the things I put in my hobbies, and then even some like words in my personal statement. And I was like, oh, these guys don't read my personal statement. And he asked about something in the last paragraph, and I was just like, oh yeah, I wrote about that. Okay. Like, so yeah, I 100% agree. Yeah. Know your application inside out for sure. General advice I have is to like practice. Like, I think like, especially because everything is virtual now, like practice virtually with other people. Don't just practice like in a mirror. Well, that's good too, but like, practice virtually and like set the whole scene up like as if you would be doing it in real life. I think that you should always have a structure for questions, and like you don't want to come off too memorized, but there should be some kind of structure so that it flows and that you come across saying what you actually want to say. I remember the first interview I did, I left and I was like, I said all these good things, but I left out so many good things. And I was like, I needed to have it more organized.
Yeah, definitely. There were like so many things I remember I just like wrote down that I'm like, okay, I should mention this about myself. I should mention this. Yeah, when you're in the moment, it's like they say, like just be yourself and just relax and all these things. And I know even though I went into it always being like whatever happens, happens, and I tried being more relaxed, just like kind of like setting myself up for that. But it's still like you get so worried about like missing something or not saying something, or like it's like one of those things, like later on, like 5 minutes later, you like leave the room and you're like, oh, like like what else I had to say, it's like that meme, you know, where people say like, oh, when you're in the shower, you always come up with like the greatest arguments
Yeah.
or argument that you had like, you know, 10 years ago or something. Just
It's
thinking like, oh, this would have been great to say. And if you remember like something that you want to say, just like write it down real quick, like have like a notepad and pen, you know, and just like have it. Because I mean, next time you get it.
100%. Also, always have good questions to ask, like specifically about the program. I think when you have those kinds of questions that are like introspective about the program, it really shows you're interested. And at the end of the day, all these programs want to know, are you really interested in them? They get so many applicants, and what makes you really stand out versus the other. And that's something I actually kind of told myself the second time I went through match. I was just like, Esha, are you going to be better than 100 other applicants that just interviewed today or like this week or whatever? And I was like, okay, like, you know, this is the truth. We have to see that.
Yeah.
For 120 slots example, for my program, we got 1,400 applicants. Like, what is going to make you stand out compared to the other hundreds? And that can be anything, whether that's on your application or outside of your application. For me, like, you know, Kristina was a big part of me joining Match Resident, and it was a great way for me to get involved in the medical community and like help others. And I think that that was like a great add into my application as well. And now I'm still doing it.
I know you are. You're more than me. So I'm glad you did join. So
Dude, you're doing surgery though, so that's like,
yeah, it's been tough to like
gotta
keep.
breathe.
Yeah, no, but I completely agree. And you know, one of the things somebody told me, I myself did it only once, but I think it's a good thing to do. But I did it for like one of the programs that like was like I really, really loved. And I was like, I would do anything like for this program, you know, like when I first like the first year applied.
Yeah.
And someone said like sometimes at the end, like, you know, when they ask you, they always ask you, like, do you have any questions for us? Right. And yes, it's always good to like, you know, have something pertinent to the that program specifically. But there was one program where I didn't want, because like your application, like as an IMG, that's already like a first red flag, right? Like no matter what you apply for, it's just, I mean, somehow it always is, and you have to talk about it. I always get asked like, why did you apply to IMG? You know, like before they ask me why did you go to surgery, they're like, why did you go to Antigua, right? So you also have to have an answer for that. But then at the end, I asked a program director for this program, and I was like, because he's like, you have questions, and I said, based on our conversation today, based on what you saw in my application, I was like, is there anything that you see that could prevent me from not matching in your program? Is there anything like any red flags or anything that you have questions about that I could answer you right now? Because let's say like they didn't like my step score or something, right? Like if he says that to me now, then I can at least talk about it and like say,
That's a really great question.
you know
Yeah.
what I mean? So if there's anything, let's say like somebody didn't have enough research, right? Like, and then they'll be like, well, I mean, like the one thing, like, you know, we value is research. Like, so why didn't you do more than you could have, right? So you always have to like, there's always going to be something in your application that someone isn't going to either like or just have questions about, but they might not remember, they might not see it as they're talking to you. But I think if you kind of open it up, like, and give them an opportunity to maybe even like just look down at the piece of paper in front of them, you know, with your name on it and your scores and everything else, maybe they'll be like, oh yeah, I remember, like, I wanted to ask this person about this. And then, you know, you at least get to say your truth and your side, or not truth, whatever it is, right? To make you look better, to make you look
Yeah.
should, you know, be there and that they want to take you. So I did it only once, and somehow, I mean, like I got a, you know, like it was like a good response to that
Good.
type, but then like I never ended up saying that again. I don't know why. I should have.
That's a good one because it really shows that like you're willing to discuss anything about you and you know who you are inside and out. And that's really strong when you come across as somebody who knows who they are in this field.
Yeah.
Um, what else can we talk about interviewing?
No, anybody has any questions? I don't know if I can see or
I can just see the chat. Yeah, do you guys have questions? Since it's only like a small handful of people.
yeah. Yeah, it's only like for other people. But yeah, just whatever you guys have questions about. Oh, I see Q&A. Should this question still be asked if we don't have any red flags? I mean, you must be you must be a top of the top of the top of the crop. So I don't feel that way about myself applying to these two programs. So if you don't think you have any red flags, then more power to you and don't ask that question.
Yeah. Don't ask that question.
No, I was like, if you don't think you have any red flags, don't ask it. No, I'm not uh, I just think it's always good to, um, I don't know how to explain it. I mean, I'm always the one that, right, like, obviously I went for like ortho, I went for surgery. So like, I'm not the one that was ever like scared or worried that like I'm not going to be good enough for something. I just knew that with like determination and time and everything that I have in me, like I was going to get in like wherever I wanted to. But then you always still have to think about it, right? Like I don't have like 270s on my score. Would I say, that 250 is a red flag? No, but for orthopedic surgery programs, like 240 could be a red flag for them, right? They can be like, well, it's 240 and we want 250. You know what I mean? So it's like little things like this, I think, or maybe like, if they want 20 publications and you only have 10, I mean, that's a red flag, right? Like it's amazing to have 10 publications, but it's like that red flag that program might consider or see. So that's what I'm saying, right? Like it's not like you don't have to have like a step score of 200 for it to be a red flag. So it's just the little things. But yeah, like I said, if you don't think that, then 100% don't say it, don't ask it. Just be like, take me, pick me, because I'm amazing, and that's it. That's what I was, just like that.
I would also add to that, like something that I did that's just like a good thing that I think to do is always send thank you emails. You can never really go wrong with thanking everybody. Um, yeah. There's another question. Sorry, series of questions coming up. How did you answer the tell me about yourself questions? Do I need to reiterate stuff in my CV or application? So Match Resident is actually posting a whole thing about how to answer tell me about yourself, but we can give you a little bit of like the way I did it was I started with like an opening line, a cute little opening line that was kind of funny, kind of got them interested in laughing. Then I went in to be like, where did I grow up? What drew me to medicine? What drew me specifically to family medicine? What am I doing now? Like, what did I do in medical school that made me a great applicant? What am I doing now in the match cycle? And things that I'm doing outside of medicine. And that maybe lasted a minute and a half.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's kind of like what they say, like that elevator pitch. I mean, like I know everybody says it, but it's hard to come up with it. Like the elevator pitch is pretty much, like you go in on the first floor, you have to get out on the 10th, right, with the person that you're interviewing with. In those 10 floors, you just have to tell them enough about yourself for them to be like, oh, I'm interested, right? So it can be, yeah, just like a few sentences, but it has to be grasping enough, I think, but also telling about who you are. And again, yeah, like I love to say, obviously, where you're from. I'll be like, oh, like, like I grew up in Russia, moved to the States when I was 16. That's like the one sentence, right? Then, like, I went, like Caribbean med school. Then, I did this, like, yeah. And now, like, I want to do surgery in one sentence. Why? In one sentence, like, why I would be a great choice to have, So it is kind of like literally, yeah, like a minute thing, like if that. Because if you're like, my interviews at least were like 10 minutes. Some rooms were 10 minutes. And I'm like, well,
oh,
if
that's
you're
short.
yeah, I'm like, if you're gonna ask me about myself, and I spent 5 minutes telling you about myself, and then the last 2 minutes is usually like that little bell, and they're like, well, this is the last 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Questions, right? So it's literally like no time to talk about anything or for them to get to know you except for you rambling on for 5 minutes, right? So it should be really short and really, I don't know, and very personable too. I think it's like it's all on Zoom, so it just like it sucks. I mean, honestly, like I hated the Zoom interviews. I wish it was in person. I'm sure, like I don't know if things would have been different for everyone. I'm sure they would have been, but I think it's always you have to smile, and just be, personable and perky and just, just have people like have good energy for people to remember you or like something.
I 100% echo that. You need that good energy. Yeah.
Yeah, you can like reiterate your CV, but not like, to the point of like reading it whole, right? But you can pick like one sentence from each paragraph, let's say, like I'm a firm believer, like everybody that I worked like on their CVs with, like I was like, we have to make your personal statement, literally it has to be less than a page. No surgery person
Yeah.
is a personal statement that even has like one line on the second page. They just won't. It's
Oh, wow.
too long. Surgery people don't like to read.
Yeah.
They don't like everything when we like write our progress notes. It's like our sentences are like 3 words, like we don't even say like you would just say like adequate urine output. Oh, like bowel
It's
movement.
actually so true. When I read surgery notes, I'm like, OMG, these guys.
So we don't ever like write things out. So if you're applying to surgery specifically, right? Like I don't exactly. Like, I'm just kind of going from my perspective, but yeah, like my personal statement was like 2/3 of a page, I think, and like, but it's just to the point. Like of everything that I needed them to know about me, and that's kind of that's what I worked with, and everybody, like personal statements. Everybody was like 2 pages, and we're like, no, like they're just like sometimes they're just like too much of like explaining of
Yeah.
too much of like past and all this other stuff. But
Yeah.
uh,
I would definitely like keep it concise. There's no need to be verbose or add more words to a personal statement than you need to. Also, I did reiterate like some things from my personal statement and some things from my CV, but it wasn't like verbatim. It was more like these experiences showed me why I would be good in this field, or this rotation really showed me that I love clinical education. I love teaching students, and that's what I want to do with my career. Um, the way like I opened up my kind of like one liner was like, hi, my name is Esha Misha Jain. My parents rhyme my first and middle names together. So I've just been like funny since I was born. And then like people like would laugh. And like then I would tell them, okay, now that you know me, here is me. And
yeah,
that's it.
yeah,
You don't have to have like a one line or anything, but something that just is memorable is always better than okay, this, like listing things off.
agreed. Yeah, you have to write. Honestly, I pre-wrote mine, like my little, like tell me about yourself. I pre-wrote it like 1,000 times, and just like until it was like concise enough, until I kind of like memorized it myself already and able to just kind of like spit it out. Like when they ask me, like be ready for that question, because like 80% of interviews I had, like somebody, at least one person from like that interview day would ask me that question. So it's definitely good because then you kind of reread it and you see, okay, maybe I should take this out, maybe I should put this in, so it's something you can start working on like now, right? And then again, like if you're in the shower, you're driving and you like think of something else, you like add that, take something else out. So there's just kind of until like you create that perfect like 30-second pitch that makes people like remember you or think about you.
Yeah, like I remember I would like randomly be walking my dog and just record random lines I would have in my head and be like, oh, Esha, add this, but don't add this. And like things will just come to you, but you like 100% write it over and over and over again until you really get what you think is worth saying.
Yeah, I agree.
What other interview advice do we have?
Yeah. Okay, this
Go to all the meet and greets if you can. Like they're a great way to like show interest in the program. I think I've repeated that like overkill.
yeah. Are there any other questions you would suggest are definitely imperative to ask the program director at the end of the interview? Um, well, that one question that I asked was the program director, about like, is there anything that from my application and everything that makes you think I would not be a good fit for your program? And then, some of them, yeah, like even actually shouldn't be in like red flags, right? But some of them will be like, well, like we're looking more for someone that's, I don't know, more uptight, you know, like I don't know, like, you know, it's just like it's different. Like the programs are so different, every single one of them. So, and every program chooses their applicants, and sometimes it's not even based on scores. Sometimes it's just, you know, it's just something they look for in personalities, that they just collect very similar groups of people, you know. So yeah, that's always, you know, a good one to ask. What else to ask a program director?
So I would also like, just in general, asking questions, split them up, like make a list of questions, things that you'll ask PD, things that you'll ask faculty, and then things that you'll ask residents, because some of the questions you're going to ask residents, I would not ask like faculty, for example. Like,
Yeah.
what do you like to eat at the caf? Like, no.
I'll be like, how is the cafeteria food? Like, tell me it's good, because if it's not, it can't be there. You know, like just
Be there, exactly.
ask your program director about it, obviously. I'm trying to think what I asked other program directors.
I asked about like transition of care because, you know, family medicine has a lot of overlap between inpatient and outpatient. And I, you know, wanted to know how that people were transitioning their care from inpatient to outpatient, and like how they were decreasing their readmit rates, because I'm really interested in patient safety. And so people were like, oh, yes, very nice. We love patient safety too.
Um, Always good to ask, I think, about like research opportunities, because I think, at least again from my perspective, like research is just so big in any type of surgical subspecialty, that I ended up, you know, everybody always asks you about research and like which one was your favorite, or like something like specific about like each one of the ones that you did. Um, but I think if you're like show, you know, like some programs are even like, you know, internal medicine, family medicine, some programs are very research based on like really bigger names programs, right? And if you got an interview there, I think it's a good way to kind of ask, you know, like what are the opportunities like? Is the staff open with working with the residents? Are there, you know, auxiliary staff that helps with research, right? And all this stuff. So I think if you're trying to show someone that you're a well-rounded person, right, and that you're not just there just to work and then go home and work and go home, like they want to see that you're going to be able to do it all, right? That you're going to be able to work, and you're going to do research and study and do well on tests and like all these things, right? Because everybody wants the best of the best. Like, you know, every program wants their scores to be the best. Every program wants their research to be the best. Every program wants to have the best numbers. Like, it's just, that's what it's for. That's where they get their money from. It's where they get the funding and everything else. So, as if you can show that you're interested in all of it, then I think it's just going to make you, even if you're not, but it might just make you look good and sound good. So I think those are things you can ask a program director also, and do your research. Like before, you know, before every program where I interviewed, I looked up obviously the program director. I looked up every faculty that I know is going to be there that day. Um, and I looked up like where they went to school, you know, what exactly they're interested in, like in the last year, like which were their like biography, like as in like all the papers that they've written in the last year. And one of the faculty, I asked him, we had like a minute left, did you have any questions? And I was like, yeah, listen, like I saw that you wrote a paper like this year on this topic. And as soon as I asked him that, his eyes were like this big and like up. And he's like, oh my God, like you saw that paper? And I'm like, yeah, of course I read. You know what I mean? Like all this, like, you just gotta like sometimes make people feel good about what they did, and you know, especially like faculty, you know, like that's what they want to see. They just want to know you did your homework, and you know, so I think that's the good things to ask. If you're a prelim, always good to ask if the prelims are treated the same as the categoricals, because I think a lot of the like UConn here, like people don't even know sometimes if you're prelim or categorical, because you treat it exactly the same. You have the same, you know, hours, number of calls, number of weekends, you know, like the same rotation. So everything is the same. Nobody knows what you're doing exactly, you know, unless obviously like you talk to them and like you talk to tell them. But otherwise, yeah, there's like no difference. It's good to ask, because I think some programs they could be like, well, if you're a prelim, right, like we might give you more calls or might give you more work, or the opposite, we might not pay attention to you as much, and then etc. So I think those are good questions to ask the program directors also.
And also on the transitional year prelim kind of path, kind of ask like, where are those applicants getting matched, or are they getting matched? Like, if you get a prelim or transitional year interview, because you want to know if you're going to get a match.
Exactly. Yeah, or like how open are you helping, right? Because some program directors might just like I'll write you a letter and then you go on and do your own thing. But there are some program directors that will go out of their way and they'll be like, hey, who do you want me to reach out to? Who do you want me to talk to? Is there anybody that you're really interested in? If I have connections, I'll help you. So you have to ask those questions. I'm sure that everybody will say yes, like that they help out a lot and everything. Again, everybody want to sound and be the best, right? But I think those are all like really good questions to ask.
Yeah. There is a question, and we'll answer it live. Is it necessary to say why you went into medicine? Because they probably would have read my PS right before the interview anyway. So, little disclaimer, depends on all the interviews you go to, what specialties. You might not have had your personal statement read before the interview started. I can guarantee that half my interviews, they did not read my personal statement before I had that interview. They probably read it after, when they were finally deciding things. That being said, like Kristina said, this is your elevator pitch. You are applying for jobs in medicine. You should say a one-liner about why you want to go to medicine. Otherwise, what is this pitch about?
Yeah.
For me, that's my opinion.
No, I agree completely. Geez, how many people probably don't, I mean, even like faculty, right? So faculty, they probably get their, I mean, yeah, they might know about like who they're interviewing the week before or whatever. Do they always have time to look through your full application? Absolutely not. Are they going to read through your full personal statement, especially if it's 2 pages? Absolutely not. Because again, it's like hundreds of personal statements to read, applications to look for. Should they? Probably yes, right? Because I feel like you get to know the people, but then again, that's what the interviews are for. So I think what gets you interviews are things like your scores, your research, your CV, right? Like everything that you put on there, that's just kind of all bullet points. That's what gets you an interview. What gets you into a residency is your interview and how well you do and how well your personality, your reasoning behind why you medicine, why you want to be a surgeon, why you want to be a pediatrician, whatever it is, right? But these are the things they ask of you, and these are the things that they're gonna they'll see if you would be a match in their residency. Because if you're good enough to get an interview, you're already past that bullet point CV.
All the filters, yeah.
You're past all of that. So now there's like, let's say like, yeah, you said 120 people, whatever, for however many slots. They chose them now because they went back again and looked at every single score. I mean, like, yeah, there might be 2 applicants that are literally like, oh my God, we just can't decide. We love them both so much. We only have one spot. But they go back and take a look at the, whose scores are higher, of course. Like, it happened many, many times. But I think if like the interviews are just for them to see your personality and your love for medicine and why you chose to do this in the first place. So I think it's very important to mention why you chose like this specialty that you did, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And one thing that I heard, like when I went to certain virtual meet and greets from a program director last year, was that sometimes they'll have their secretary print out the person's application and just highlight some of the red flags or things to talk about. And that's something maybe the program director will just skim through and focus on. I've also heard things where they really focus on the first 2 pages of your application, where there's the research and the awards and all that stuff. And then the rest, they see it, because my application was like 13 pages, like I know people's applications have extensive experiences on them. So there's definitely no way they read all those 13 pages. Like, let's be real.
No, 1,400 applicants. No, I mean, look at like, half of those, but in general, yeah. It's just insane. I mean, would you blame them? Imagine like working all day and then going and sitting down your office and reading 2-page personal statements. I mean,
Yeah.
how long does it take? I just feel like there's not enough time in the year to look through everybody's application.
Yeah.
And time pressing. I mean, like what they start, submit applications, what like in end of September, and the interviews can start as soon as like now.
Hmm.
And 1 month, how much you have to filter through, applications still keep coming in and in. So it's not easy. And sometimes it's not even because sometimes people don't get interviews in certain places where like they 100% thought that they would. And like I've been there too. I've been like, I was like, oh my God, like, I've been like, I was like counting my interviews, like, oh my God, yeah, I'm going to get this, I'm going to get this, I'm going to get
Yep.
this. Disappointed when you don't get something, but then you can't take it personally because honestly, half the time it's like just about the luck. It's about who and what time is going to pick up your application, who's going to read it out of like the 10 people that are sitting there and reading it. If that person is going to like fall in love with you and fight for you and want to, keep you and have you in the residency. So it's like there's so much work that we do to get to where we are, but I think a lot of it is also luck and who it is that looks at your application and what mood they're in and what exactly they're looking for.
It's really true. I remember I did a majority of my rotations at Rumsey in Staten Island, and they didn't have a family medicine program, but I also dual applied. I applied to some IM because I could do the primary care track through that. And they didn't issue me an interview. And I literally spent a year and a half of my soul giving back to this community and this hospital. But like you said, I couldn't take it personally. Like I got all these interviews from other places, which are so fantastic. And you know what? It is what it is. You're going to get interviews from places you least expect it.
Exactly, 100%.
Let's go to this next question. How would you approach these sort of obscure questions if you could invite anyone living or dead to dinner? Who would it be and why? So I actually got that question. I got the question, if you could invite 3 people who have died, who would you invite? And like, it was not a question I prepared for. And I was just like, well, I gave 2 of like family members that I really wanted and what their role meant in me pursuing medicine. And that's something like I just thought about on the spot. Like my grandmother, she paved the way for us because in India, they didn't, my great grandmother, they didn't give females medicine, like, or like education. Females didn't do education. And she was the first in our family to have education. So she's definitely somebody I would want to have dinner with. Then I talked about, okay, I had a quote in my personal statement from Mahatma Gandhi, and it just came to me. I was like, okay, that guy, I want to have lunch with him too. Like he was in my personal statement. Let's revive him. I really agree with everything he said.
Oh,
But you can't, I don't know how to answer that question. How do you answer obscure questions? But you can always start by saying, that's a great question. I would love a minute to think about it.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, it's more, those are like the personality questions. This is when they try and like weed out people that, yeah, it's more like personality and like think on the spot. 100%, right? Because it's like, who in their right mind would like, one, do they even care? Like, who would you have dinner with? No, it's more of like, yeah, like just finding out if you can think on the spot, if it's something that you're just like really good at. I don't remember. I actually don't think I was asked, like I said, surgery people are very uptight. Surgery people were like asking me like very serious questions. And there I was with like my bleach blonde hair and I had this like huge bow on my thing with like my pink pen in my hand. Oh my God, it was terrible.
Medically blonde.
Yeah. Uh, so, but it's just something, it's a very personal question in the sense of like, yeah, you can either think of like family members and why, right? Or you can think of like, I don't know, your favorite poet, right? And like why? Like you said, like you used, yeah, I mean, yours is way better because I used Denzel Washington's quote in my personal statement, and I was like, oh God. So I feel like I would have to say I would invite Denzel to my dinner, if I could ever in life. I mean, he's my favorite actor, so that's why I use like his
There
quote.
you go.
But so it's stuff like that. So yeah, maybe if you use somebody's name in the personal statement, like use it. If there's like a favorite artist, you can say that. Like even if it's I don't know, like I don't know if you want to like hang out with Megan Fox. You know, I'm just like saying, I was trying to think of an artist, and I thought of Machine Gun Kelly or whatever for 1 second, and then I'm like, wait, but don't say you want to invite him to dinner. Please don't do that. You know, no matter like who it is, at least just show your personality. You know, like if it's a musician, yeah, just like say there's something like this is what you listen to and that's what you love. You know, if it's like a minion from the movie, you know, like that you want to like revive and have them come to life and be here. Like it's literally just all personality, but like again, enough to like try to explain like why that particular person that you would want, you know, to be. But there's so many. I do remember there was like someone posted a bunch of questions like that somewhere where like they asked about like who'd you have dinner with, or what were some other good ones, like the obscure questions. I don't remember anymore.
I got like one that was like, if your best friend were to say like one great thing about you and one bad thing about, or like one thing to improve, like, you know, what would that be?
Or like what how would your friends describe you in
Yeah.
3 words? Gotten that one before.
I got a question. They love these behavioral questions. Like, tell me about a time you made a mistake in your clinical practice. And like, I think there's a trick in the way you need to answer questions. Like, you're not going to give them the biggest mistake that you've ever done. Please do not. Like, for me, I said like, the mistake that I did was I was in the OR and I had scrubbed up and my nose was itchy and I broke sterility, and everybody called me out and I called myself out, but I realized what I had done. I went and made a post about it on Instagram and actually taught myself and taught others. And so that's the way I kind of answer that question, to show like I made a silly mistake, but I also realized why it was so serious. People are at their most vulnerable times in the OR, like they're literally naked in front of you, and why, you know, this is so important to educate other people. Yeah, like I think it's all, even like with the like you said, it doesn't matter who the person is that you had at dinner. It's about what that person meant to you. And like if it's like a poet or a dead musician, like, you know, maybe that person provides you so much stress relief that like in residency, this is somebody that like really brings you like closure, or really brings you, gets you grounded. So it doesn't always have to be related to medicine, but
Yeah.
make a relation as to why that person will be at your table.
Yeah. And with like mistakes, like, yeah, it's a good point that you brought up that like if you talk about, let's say, like something that an event that taught you something, or if you made a mistake, I think the idea behind it is not to like tell them and like be honest about like, yes, like I made this mistake, like I'm forgiven, right? But like I think the idea behind it is like you have to explain that that taught you something and that you found a way out of it and you found a way to learn from it. And I think that's what they want to hear more than anything, is just to make sure that, you know, it's like, you know, don't make the same mistake twice type of thing, that you definitely learned something from it and that like you got out of it, you got something out of it and you learned. So I think that's the biggest thing they want to hear.
Yeah, agreed.
Or if it's something, I think I heard before, I think somebody asked, not me, but somebody else before, about what do you think your worst quality is, or something like that, or like your disadvantage, blah, blah, blah. And then I remember when I thought about it for myself, like what I would say, I think I've always been bad at public speaking, and like I'm always terrified of public speaking. So like I knew that that I could use that as like, oh, my biggest downfall is that like I am not as comfortable public speaking, but these are the things I'm doing to get better. These are the things I want to do for my future to be good at this, because, you know, I want to be able to talk to you guys, right? Like now, all this stuff, like, and, you know, like I'm having like tachycardia, like good thing I'm not teeny, but, you know, but it's just little things that even like when you say something negative about yourself, you have to say how you're going to get better or what you're going to do better to kind of like erase that, you know, like negativity or whatever it is.
100%, 100%. Like, and yeah, any quality that you have, you just should just be like what you're doing to, yeah, get better. 100%. Do we have another question? Yeah, we have lots. What's the difference between FM versus IM FM? Well, okay, I can answer this. So FM is family medicine, FM, like IMFM, which is primary care track, is a part of internal medicine specialty. So you'll still have to do internal medicine. You'll still have to learn all of inpatient medicine, way more than family medicine really does. But you can choose then in your third year to do like a primary care track where you're mainly just outpatient based and you're not a hospitalist. So you're an internal med doctor in the outpatient setting, basically. That answers that question.
Someone said, so at the end of the day, whoever's scores are high would get the spot anyway. Yes and no. So there are plenty of people that I would have much lower scores, but they would get the position because on the interview they did a lot better, they fit better the program, they have better personality, etc. And your scores are not the only thing. But what I mentioned was, let's say there are two people that are exactly, like there's one spot left, two people that program director and the faculty equally loved, they just can't decide. And sometimes those scores between those two people could be the deciding factor. Depends again on what the program is looking for. Sometimes the number of papers you publish could be the deciding factor. Sometimes they would reread your personal statement. That could be it just depends exactly what the program is looking for. And you can never tell, honestly, what they're looking for. But it's just in that moment. I mean, do programs offer more positions to people with higher scores? Of course. When you have the highest scores and your application is the cream of the crop, you are going to get, almost every interview invite, right? So like when I remember when I first applying the first year to ortho, or even like second year to surgery, it's now, especially being on Zoom, I remember just like reading the Reddit sheets, and there's so many people that got like 40 and 50 interviews because, again, like their scores help them get there and get those interviews. And unfortunately, now in the Zoom world, they're able to keep all of those, and they're able to do all of those because they don't have to travel. There's no extra days. Like before, people would have to drop interviews because they just weren't able to make them all because they were on the same dates or like one day apart and they were traveling, so they weren't able to do it. But now you can do an interview every day. You can every night, or day or whatever it is, like you can do an interview and you can do 50 of them if you wanted to. So then a lot of the people that were with lower step scores, they didn't get as many interviews. They didn't get that trickle that every year gets like passed down, right? Somebody cancels the interview, then it just gets passed on until somebody accepts it, right? So that's that's one of the main disadvantages of Zoom interviews, I believe, personally, is that a lot of us could have seen more interviews, just that, but we didn't because people with higher scores and better applications and non-IMGs, etc., got got those interviews. And then people are scared and people are worried. So I don't like, does it suck that they went to all 50, and like decided to not share, so to say? Of course. End of the day, like it's their livelihood too, and it's their future. And I'm sure everybody's worried and scared about getting into a program. So if you have so many interviews and you deserve them, then if that's what you wanted and you kept them and you went to all of them, then you have a higher chances of matching. So I know we all want to think of each other and be very polite and nice, but I think that it's very hard to get into residency these days, that you have to put yourself first no matter what. So if you're going to be one of those amazing people that gets all those interviews and you're able to go to them, I don't see why not. And that sounds very selfish and sounds very bad, but I think maybe it stems from, doing a prelim year and like applying twice. And I think maybe, that's why I feel this way in particular. But like I said, like it's great to have the toppest of the scores. If you don't, it's not the end of the world. But like I said, if it comes down to two people that are completely the same, but there's one thing that differentiates you two, then they would go for someone who has that advantage.
Yeah. unfortunately, like it just is the way it is. Like scores open doors for you and they close doors for you. Like, so for me, my step one score would not guarantee me an interview for some surgery programs for sure. Like, it's just, that's what it is. Scores get you in the door, but that's not going to mean that you won't get an interview. So for certain specialties like family medicine, internal medicine, like for family medicine specifically, when they see certain scores like 250s and 260s, but then they look at the rest of the application and they don't see a family med geared profile, they kind of know that these people are applying to family med as their backup. And so they don't initiate interviews to these people with the 260s and 250s. If their rest of their application, if they have 0 FM LORs, like, you know, it just shows that you're just applying here as a backup, and no specialty wants to think that they're a backup. Like, and I would totally agree. Like, if I had gotten 30 interviews, for example, or more, like I probably would have gone to all 30 interviews. But just so you know, every place you rank after 20, you have to pay. So that's on you to decide, you know, what your pocketbook looks like.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I dual applied FM and IM to be a primary care physician, goal in mind. And the slightest chance that program asks about if I applied to another program, what's the best way to answer this? I never got answered that question, and I applied to a few specialties. I don't think that that's like, you know, I mean, they really know.
Primary care physician goal in mind. That's why it is chance of program. What's the best way to answer? You mean if like you apply to the other subspecialty? Yeah, I see.
I applied to like multiple specialties in many programs in many states, and I never once got that question. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I got asked. Once, like, oh, like what other programs did you apply in surgery? You know, I got supposed to, but there were so many questions. I remember, like, I get asked that, like, like those like taboo questions. But again, it's one of those things too. It's like you can be the person that says, "Well, that is not an appropriate question to ask me, so please don't." You know what I mean? You can be that, and I just kind of, I mean, I'm very comfortable with answering whatever because I don't care, right? In the sense that like this is what I'm doing and I'm very open about it. But like it's kind of like you have like nothing to lose. So if somebody asks you, they know which question is a taboo question. So like if they ask you, they know what they're doing. So I think it just shows like the lightheartedness in you as a person when you're like, yeah, I mean, I applied like, you know, programs in California because I like California. There are a couple programs that I like in Florida, so I applied there. So I think it's just, you know, good to like answer and say why sometimes. Like I always just spoke about like when they asked me like which other surgery programs I applied to, I said like, yeah, I mean like a lot of my family is in Florida. Like I applied to a bunch there. Like I love California. I applied to a bunch there. You know, like I applied to IMG friendly programs. So you can answer like those questions. But I don't remember you know, or hearing from anybody else if like somebody dual applied, like why? Because I know a lot of people apply surgery and then they do like IM or FM as their backup, but I have not personally heard of anyone getting asked about it. But I know that, like you said, like IM and FM, I mean, like they're similar in the sense that, I mean, yeah, FM is going to be like its own track, but like you said, even through IM, you can get into you know, whatever it is that you need to like in the future, right? Like if that were the case. So you can always mention that like the primary care is like my finish goal and I can get there with either or, and I can specialize afterwards, like doing whatever. So as long as you just find a way around it, I think, or you explain what your end goal is. But let's say if you're applying surgery and you're putting IM as your backup, and then IM asks you like, oh, like what else did you, you know, did you apply to? I mean, like I would not mention. Honestly, I would not mention surgery. I would just be like, you know, like internal medicine, primary care is my, because it's just not the same. There's just like no two things in surgery and primary care that are the same. Honestly,
like there's there's a lot of overlap between FM, IM, peds, maybe even psych, but
yeah,
not overlap with surgery.
So if you do that, then they'll know it's just something that you do as backup. And again, nobody wants to think of their program as backup. There hundreds, hundreds of people that would kill for a spot in every specific program. No matter where you are, there are always people that either went to, did a what's it called, an away rotation there, somebody that grew up there, somebody has history there in that particular program that they would die to be a part of it. So they will not just give a spot to somebody that thinks of them as backup. So that much I will tell you. So every program director needs his ego stroked because they need to say and think that their program is the best, and only people that want to be there are the ones that will deserve the spot. Again, so many applications, so many applicants. So
You do have to show that you really want that spot more than everybody else. Like, however you can do that, and like why you deserve that spot.
and sometimes it's location, because I know when one of my friends, I know that like they were all like just part of like talking about prelims the first year here at UConn. And I know somebody mentioned, even though it's like random and it has nothing to do with like my capabilities as an intern or as a surgeon, right? But then somebody said, well, all of her family is in Florida.
Mm.
Why would we torture her and keep her here in Connecticut when all of her family is in Florida? Is she going to be homesick? Is she going to be, like, does she not have the support system here that like she needs, etc.? So like those are the things that they think about also, right? But like I'm glad that like somebody like obviously like knows me well enough, or like learned about me throughout the year. They're like, oh no, like her fiance is going to move up here if she matches here, she'll have him, and like her family, like they're very close and all this stuff. So I think these programs, they think about everything, right? Like, so it's just even like location wise, yeah, like they will, let's say like, yeah, you're from California, but you want to be like in Kentucky, but like you just apply to Kentucky because you think it's like an easy program to get into or something, or like somewhere in Iowa, like, I don't know, like anything. So they will look too at where you did all your rotations and like why you apply to this program.
Yeah. And like to add to that, if you are applying to a place, like let's say you're from like a foreign country and you're applying to a place you've never done a rotation, and they clearly know you don't have an attachment to that country or supports there or like in that state, but then talk about what you're going to do to mitigate that. Like, okay, like, yes, I know I don't know much about this program or this state particular or this town, but these are all the things I'm going to do to learn about this program. These are all the things that I know will make me comfortable no matter where I go, so that they have that confidence in you that, okay, she might not have her support system here, but she knows how to stay strong in adversity, or she's resilient, or he is resilient, whatever.
Yeah, it's important because obviously they talk about it, and like if somebody's homesick, it's just not the same, and it's residency is tough. It's a lot of hours, it's a lot of learning. It's like the steepest learning curve you'll ever experience in your life during the first year of residency specifically. But yeah, so I think people want to know that you will be okay. you
Yeah,
know
and that's why they ask you about your hobbies, because they want to know like you have things that are tangible outside of medicine that help you be a normal human.
yeah, 100%.
Because medicine does not help you be a normal human.
No, got asked so many times. They're like, so like, what do you do, like on your days off? Like, let's say you're not at work, like, what would you do? And I mean, I always talk about like, yeah, like I love to just go outside or like running, and those can be like very similar things, right? Like, you don't need to say that, like, oh, like I love to go and like fly to space or like build spaceships,
Yeah.
it have to be exactly something like out of the ordinary. Yeah, it's always cool to say something else, like, yeah, like I play a violin, like it's like to practice at home, like something like that, but even if it's simple, like, yeah, I like to get out of the house, go for a run, go for a hike, go get a coffee, and just walk around and enjoy my day. Like, those are the things that show that you're not like this crazy attached person to, like you wake up and the first thing you think about, oh my God, like I need to study. I need to sit by the computer and I need to look at this. Yeah, like studying is great, but there are also times where you just need to relax and you need to unwind. even if you say you're watching, like I just finished like the Jeffrey Dahmer not too long ago, on Netflix. But even if you say that, like, oh, like I love to watch Netflix like documentaries, and stuff like that. Like, yeah, it's like scary as hell, but like the Jeffrey Dahmer thing, but like somehow unwind, But I think it's from like everything that you experience in the hospital is just like just being on the couch sometimes is just enough, So as long as you can express that you can cope with everything that residency comes with, and it's everything. It's illnesses, it's sadness, it's death. And those are the things that, besides all the good things, right? But these are the things that they want you to try and disattach yourself from and learn how to cope with that, because it's not easy. And I know that all of us have come home crying more than once, like in the, whether patient, whether it's somebody else at work, whether it's just like the commotion of the day or the load of the, of the work, etc. So there's always days that you come home and you're like, I don't think I did enough. Like, I don't think I was good enough. Or like, well, like this patient died. Like, like all of these things happen and you have to be able to cope with it. Like, you do it in your own way. But again, programs need to know that you're able to at least come home.
Yep. They need to know that you're like a balanced individual. I think it's like 8:00. Regarding publications, how should you prepare for talking about them if they're relatively complex and will require memorizing your own results?
I don't think you need to ever go into like detail of these things. Honestly, I would just be like, oh, we looked at this and this is what's better. The end.
I never went into detail about any of my publications, but what I did say was why I was so interested and why I did them and what they taught me. And why I think it's so cool, because not only am I going to have to do it in residency, I love contributing to medical advancements. Oh my God.
Yeah, perfect. Write that down. Whoever has a pen right now, say that. Yeah, exactly. It's exactly what it is. It's just, you have to say why you love that project, why you think it's going to contribute to medicine. Because publications are done because they need to be, they need to add something to medicine. Publications are like just to do them, right? I mean, like for us, like we do them just to do them, right? But people do them, or like our attendings work on them like their whole lives, and like researchers, because they want to add value to medicine, they want to bring something new to it, etc. So you just have to say how your project helps medicine. Don't go into like p-values and like Z's and CIs, whatever else is there. I don't remember anymore. Like, don't go into numbers. Don't say like 13 out of 25 patients. Don't ever.
Yeah. Don't bring up the forest plots. Yeah.
Okay. So you have an interview where the PD will not be interviewing me and the 2 associate professors will be instead. Is this normal, or does this raise questions on why the PD doesn't interview prospective applicants? I don't think so. I mean, I guess I've never been, but I don't know.
It's happened to me where I've been interviewed by just faculty and not the PD. It depends on the program. And this was like an academic program. It was at Buffalo, where the PD really didn't interview, but it was like faculty, and then the PD would like come like maybe for certain interviews. I don't know if it was like he wanted to be in certain places and stuff, but
maybe he's on vacation.
Yeah, like they're spread really thin. I know like my program director right now, she's pregnant. Like, I don't think she's gonna go to every person's interview. Like, she's giving birth in December. Like, let's be real.
No, honestly, because it's not just the program director that decides who is getting the spot, right? Like, there's a reason. Do they have the final say? Yes. But does it come just from their experience? No, it comes from experience of all the faculty, of all the residents. That's why there's so many interviews, and I would say there's so many different people interviewing and asking different questions. So it stems from that collective decision. Program director, yes, will make the final decision, but it stems from them. So I think, I mean, I guess everybody's different. Some program directors want to be on top of it, and they have to meet every person. They have to see this and that, but some program directors maybe trust their faculty enough to make the right decision, and they just kind of like go, and then they just look at the applications and get the sense of what type of person you are and whether you were elected the interview, and then that's it.
Sometimes I was interviewed by the chair of the program and not the program director. So it was like chair and other faculty. So, you know.
Yeah, exactly. There was a program once that the chairman, they wanted him to be there for every interview.
Wow.
Was in the timing that I was scheduled for was he was in surgery. So we schedule my interview just one-to-one with him like 3 days later or something like that. Just my one-to-one, 10 minutes, and that's it. But you know what I mean? Like, so these are the kind of, it's very different. Every program is going to, he wasn't a program director, he was the chairman. So
yeah,
different. Eye contact big. Yeah, and I'm the worst at eye contact. I don't know if anybody noticed. I'm wearing like my glasses, but yeah, hard. I mean, like now I'm like staring at the
yeah,
little thing, but this whole time I've just been either staring at myself or Esha. I'm just going back.
exactly same.
Like, I have. It's hard. It's terrible, hard, and I don't know what your advice is on this.
This is why practicing with people over Zoom is so important, because I did that and I would look down at Kristina, like at the Zoom thing, and then up at the camera. And I would go in between because it kind of looked creepy when I was staring directly into the camera like all the time.
Yeah.
So I would definitely practice that. And kind of like they know that you're looking at them on a Zoom. They know you're not looking directly at the camera. I had one person in my interview, he was a resident and he like was sick, I guess. And so was I, like I had a runny nose and everything, but he's like, oh, I'm so sick, I'm going to turn off my camera. And like, do you mind if I do the interview this way? And like, of course it's just a ploy. And I was like, yeah, whatever. Like I'm sick too, but I brought my tissues. And then like, I did the interview and I stared at whatever screen I basically stared at myself the whole time, but
like because it's hard. It's hard to just like want to stare at them, because you want to see the other person too and the way they respond to you and the way, like when you're saying things, you kind of want to see their, like, are they looking at you like the hell you're saying, or are they looking at you like, oh my God, like I love that. So that's why Zoom is hard. In person, you're staring at the person, you see their reaction, their body language, everything. On Zoom, I mean, like you have to look at the other person. You can't just be camera. You have to see, engage on, if what you're saying like makes sense, pretty much.
yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
If not, I think we are done.
Okay. Good. We'll give you guys 30 seconds. Any more questions? We'll do like final thoughts.
Yeah.
Before so honestly, two things. Be yourself no matter what. I said in the very beginning, my biggest advice is just to you have to show your personality. You have to be yourself. If you're, quirky, if you like something extra, if you want to wear a pink outfit, you know what I mean? Like, do whatever it is that you want to do, because you have to fit in the right program. You cannot just pretend to be somebody you're not, and then you get there, and then 5 years later, you're just like, the hell,
Yeah.
And then definitely know everything about your application. Read it through and through. And then somebody just said thank you letters. Yeah, definitely. Afterwards, usually the coordinator at the end of the interviews will send you the emails of every person you got. I mean, at least that's what happened with me. Like they send the emails of every person you talk to. If they don't in the 24 hours or even in 12, I don't know. Let's say your interview's at night and then you wake up the next morning, you still don't have an email from the coordinator giving you the names and everybody you talk to, email that clinical coordinator and be like, hi, I would like to send thank you letters to all of the people I interviewed with. Can you please provide me with that information? Usually they say yes, and they'll just send it right away. And you just say, the thing is, after every interview, when you have a little bit of time between each interview, let's say like you have like 5 minutes or something between, write down one thing, like best part about that interview, right? Like one of the interviews, like it was in Texas, they asked me to draw a map of Texas. They'll be like, draw us a map of Texas. And I drew something and they're like, what is this? It would look like a little like we were laughing, we were dying laughing in that interview. It was 2 faculty people and me, and I'm just like, oh my God. And then I had like my little cat pen or something, like with like fluffy head, and they're like, that a fluffy head pen? And I'm like, yes. And then that's what we talked about for 10 minutes of my interview, I swear. And so when I wrote them a thank you letter, I thanked them for being kind, lighthearted, open. I sent them a picture of my picture again for them to remember me. You know, like it's
Yeah.
just write it down real quick. When you have like those 5 minutes between the interviews, write down what you talked about and put that in your thank you letter. Like, thank you for mentioning, you know, that like I stand out because I have this and this. Like, thank you for talking to me about like, you know, like my past and where I was born, you know, like thank you for the or whatever. Just thank them for something that you got out of that interview.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's the most important one. And this should be like a few liners. It shouldn't be like a paragraph either.
For me, I sent like thank you cards the second time around to only like my top 8 programs.
Nice.
I don't know why I felt like I needed to be like that, but I did.
Any
Yeah.
extra that you can do.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Congrats to your first IV tomorrow. We're happy to help.
Yeah. Resident meet and greet. Are there any questions that can be revealed? Red flags about the program.
What does that mean?
I don't know.
Are there any questions that can be asked to reveal?
Like,
I would stray away from trying to ask about negative things about any program. Like Kristina said, like they like when you stroke their ego versus like not. Of course, there's like some things like, oh, like I saw that you soaped last year. What happened? Like I could have asked that to a couple of programs. I just strayed away from that. Like, you know, if it's not for me, was not worth it to like really pick at their program. Like I could obviously tell they soaped. That's an issue for me. They can obviously tell this is my score here. That's an issue for them. Like, did they always ask me about it? No.
yeah, I think some of it just depends on your interest, right? Because then there's some programs I remember that I was like, oh, like somebody asked like, oh, like, you know, how often do you guys see each other? Like as a class, like do you guys hang out as a group? And there were some programs that said, hey, listen, like we are so busy. We go home, we have like 5,000 kids and a wife and or a husband to attend to. We do not have time to socialize with each other. We see each other at work and that's enough. I mean, is that enough for me? Probably, because I'm like a homebody. Like, you know, that doesn't bother me, but there are people that it would bother them, right? Like, there are people that want to be in a program that's like more tight knit. And then they're always like, you know, like, oh, like, let's go get drinks after this. Let's go hang out. Let's go do this. You know, it's more social. So maybe just ask questions that, like, yeah, that you think would be more important to you. Like, I asked questions food because food is important to me. I was like, do you have good food in a cafeteria? You know, like, that's what I would ask about. And then they talked about it. So it's like great. I mean, not that I would ever make a decision just based on that, but at least like it's something that's like just interesting, like important to ask. But yeah, like if you say like the social values of the program, which is like what we're there for. Meet and greet with residents is about learning their social, you know, everything in people's personalities, etc. So ask those questions. And I mean, if it's not the answer that you know that you wanted to hear, then again, like that may not be the program for you, which is why all of these things are so important.
100%. Yeah. And also, I think one piece of advice I'll give is that remember, they're not just interviewing you, you're interviewing them. And that's something that I didn't really realize was so important until my second time around. Picking where I want to go was a much healthier decision than having to, like, you know, and I'm very blessed I have that option. But I'm also like, I interviewed the programs too. Like, I was like, okay, like you said, I like the way these guys have social interaction, or I like the fact that they're really into their research, or I like the fact that they do an underserved community. So yeah, keep that in mind. It's not just about you, it's about them too. And if you will fit there, like, will you be healthy? Because at the end of the day, this is like, you're practicing medicine, you should be happy doing it.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Thanks for all your questions.
Everybody, all the things. Okay. I don't think anybody has any more.
Change from my work clothes now because I still have it.
I don't know. Yeah, thank you guys for being here. Yeah, I think I'm informative when we do this. I hope we can do more of these.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks,
Um,
Kristina.
Thank you. That was great. Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.